Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this episode of My Fellow CRE Influencers. I am 1031 Broker James. Thanks for joining me today for Best 1031 Online. And joining me today is Alan Buchanan of Lee & Associates, a more than 40-year veteran of CRE, as well as a pioneer in both digital and social media. My good friend, Alan Buchanan. Alan, good morning. How are you today?
Never better, James. Good to see you, my friend.
Likewise. I'm so glad that you could be here. So, right off the bat, do you remember how we met?
It was either at a Massimo immersion or it was at the very inaugural CREI event. And frankly, I know those were within a year or so of one another. Probably a Massimo immersion would be my guess.
Actually, yes, it was the Massimo Immersion event down in Orange County that we did. I think that was 2018.
2018 sounds right. I know there was an Orlando Massimo immersion in 2018. So it could have been early 2019, but no, you're right. You're right in that correct time frame.
Yep. And then, of course, I know you were at the first Massimo Con event.
Right.
And then again, we crossed paths again at the CREI Summit, which we'll talk about here coming up. So we're both Southern California guys. And
yes, sir.
An interesting thing, I don't know if I've shared this with you or not, but, I started my career in Phoenix. I was in Phoenix for 30 years after I got out of the service. I moved back home here in 2015. But early in my career, I got licensed in the summer of 2000, and it was probably 2001, maybe 2002. I actually did a pretty significant transaction with one of your fellow principals, David Newton.
Really?
Yeah.
Never heard of him.
So David, he was with a boutique firm.
Yes.
I think he was a principal of back then.
Correct. He had a partner. You're absolutely right. Still doing the same thing. Yeah, David's one of my dear friends. He just absolutely crushes it. He's a tenant rep predominantly and does work in the home healthcare industry. And
yep,
guy who's been
I represented the landlord. We had a small business park in Tempe, and David brought us a regional pharmaceutical lab, is what my recollection was. And it was a pretty significant deal for the park. I think they were like the third or fourth largest tenant in the park. And, the landlords really didn't want to make the deal happen. And it was going to be, I was very early in my career, and it was going to be a significant deal for me. And I busted my tail to get that deal done. And David was awesome to work with. And so I know you guys I don't know when he joined Lee & Associates, but
2007, David joined Lee. So he's been here almost 20 years.
Yeah, so maybe 5 years after I worked with him. Yeah. But yeah, so that just goes to show you how small the planet is that we live on here, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
So quickly, like with Massimo coaching, what was the impact that being a Massimo member in the coaching, what was the impact of that on your career?
One word, transformational. Absolutely transformational. I joined the Massimo coaching program in 2018. I considered doing it in 2017, decided the timing just wasn't right. And about that time, Bo Barron started working with Rod as his COO, I guess it is. And Bo and I were close. We met on social media as well. Anyway, it just became pretty apparent one afternoon. My wife walked in and said, "Hey, what would it take for you to become she called it a badass producer because she had read You're Going to Be a Badass by Jen Sincero." And I said, "Well, I'd hire the Massimo group." And she goes, "Then do it." And she goes, do everything they tell you to do. Don't argue with them. Don't debate them. Just do it. Which I did, and I was fortunate to be paired with Doug Molyneux, who's just to this day one of my best pals. He's a great guy, and he and I had amazing chemistry, and we just accomplished wonderful things together. I know you know Doug well, and I know that you have a similar sentiment about him. But yeah, that was it. I forever wanted to become an elite producer. And I know that word has different meanings for different people, but for me, that was a certain income level that I wanted to achieve. I was 61 years old at the time and knew that I was probably on the back nine of my career. And if I was going to do it, I better do it. So I shared that with Doug. I said, Doug, here's what I want to accomplish. By the way, Doug had done that in his market a number of times, so I knew he knew how to accomplish it. And we back channeled it. We said, well, if you're gonna do that, then it's going to translate into this many calls a week. And I said, okay, well, what if I increase the this many calls a week to the this many plus 15%? And he says, I will guarantee you will hit your goal if you do that. And by George, I did. I just went in it with blind faith. I did everything he told me to do. As you well know, we track metrics on a weekly basis, calls and meetings and all the rest. I hit my metrics for 52 weeks in a row in 2019, 52 weeks in a row. And these are, we're not talking about someone starting at rookie level who doesn't have anything else to do other than call prospects. I had a book of business I was managing. I had a family. I had all these things. And I did it 52 weeks in a row. And so I'm happy to say that I have achieved that level now for 7 years straight, and could not have done it had it not been for the Massimo coaching program. Just absolutely couldn't. So there's a big shout out for you, Rod.
Yes. Yeah, I refer to Doug as Obi-Wan. He's our most tenured coach now. And he's, just to quickly give a quick plug to Doug, we were at one of our coaching summits, and we were talking about productivity and all this stuff and how we factor in coaching with our brokerage practice. And Doug just blurted out, said, I only coach my clients on first and third week of the month. The second and fourth week are my weeks. And I heard that and I was like, that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, I carry a larger roster than he does, but, I said I can't do that, but I could carve out time that's specifically for coaching calls. And so that year, which was 7 years ago now, I said I'm not taking coaching calls on Mondays and Fridays.
Nice.
Game changer.
100%.
So the takeaway there is that you got to get control of your week. As soon as you get control of your week, because there's no way you can hit your metrics 52 weeks in a row if you do not have control of your week. You cannot be winging it. You can't be flying by the seat of your pants, etc.
Yeah, it's so true. And that was one of the very overwhelming things that I realized early on. I said, boy, to make the amount of outbound dials that I committed to make, you have to be incredibly intentional. It doesn't happen by chance. And I would get to so the way Doug and I set it up is I had to make a certain number of calls and a certain number of completions.
Right.
And if I made the completions in half the amount of committed calls, I still had to make the calls, right? If that makes sense. So hypothetically, if I committed to make 70 calls a week and 30 completions, and I made 30 completions and 40 calls, I still had to make the 70 calls.
That's right.
And I would hit Fridays sometimes, and I would be at whatever my committed completions was, and I'd still have, 50 more dials. It's like, God, but I got to do it. I just flat got to do it, because I knew I'd be seeing his smiling face the next Tuesday, and if I didn't have it done, I couldn't face him. So it was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks for sharing that. Let's move to because I'm guessing that if you started your coaching in 2017, I know that you started Traffic Tips before that.
Correct.
So
yep.
What initially inspired you to dive into social media as a commercial real estate broker?
Great question. 2009, and if you recall, in Southern California, we had just experienced a little minor blip in our business called the Great Financial Reset. And beginning of 2009, I was wondering if there was going to be a commercial real estate market. The business that I had done up in that time was similar to the business you do now, James, where I was working with a half a dozen high net worth individuals. We'd sell a couple of buildings. We'd redeploy the money into a couple more. I was playing a lot of golf, having a wonderful time. And then 2008 hits, and banks stopped lending, buyers stopped buying, sellers stopped selling. It was just absolute panic.
Mm-hmm.
And so about the same time, my wife chose to go back to school. All our kids were away to college and the like. My wife elected to go back to school at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, and a big check to write, but very, very worth it. So she came home one day and said, "You need to start blogging." And this was 2009. "You need to start blogging." And I said, "I have no idea what that even means." And she said, "You write about what you do every day and you post it online." And I said, "If I do that, 3 people are going to read it. I'm going to read it twice and you're going to read it once." She goes, "No, no, no, you're missing the point." She goes, "The point is, you do what you do, you create the voice, you create the digital footprint. Now all of a sudden someone Googles how to find commercial real estate and you pop up." And I said, "Okay, that makes a little more sense." So I started to research, and then just back up one sec, the term she used, which I carry to this day, is you need to work out loud. Whatever work you're doing, and you and I are working out loud right now. We're talking about our business. This is going to be on a YouTube piece. You and I will slice it, dice it, share it, what have you. But she says you need to work out loud. And I started doing some research into commercial brokers at the time that were blogging. And there were two that were blogging at the time: Coy Davidson and Duke Long. That was it.
Who was the other
Harvey,
one?
beg your pardon?
Who was the other one?
Duke Long. Duke
See,
Long.
I've never even heard of him. Obviously, we
Yeah,
know who
see,
Coy is.
and Duke was the man. He wrote very edgy content, amazing, very, very fun to read. As you know, Coy was very much the practitioner, all about Houston office and medical office buildings and what have you. Completely different styles. But I studied him and I said, you know what? I believe I can take a middle road here, and I can find a voice. So that's the way it started with the blogging. So I was blogging 4 or 5 years before I started the Tuesday Traffic Tips. The way the Tuesday Traffic Tips started real quickly is I was driving to work one day and I was really getting more heavily involved in Twitter, and I wanted to create some Twitter content, and I knew video was going to be huge. I've been using video for 4 or 5 years at that time. Knew video was going to be huge. So I thought, well, I live in Southern California. There's a lot of traffic in Southern California. What if I did a Tuesday traffic tip, a tip from the front seat of my car about the brokerage business? And so I said, great idea. I held out my phone, boom, do the Tuesday traffic tip, post it. Linda Day Harrison, who was a good friend at the time, texts me and she goes, "Oh my God, you are going to kill yourself or someone else. Don't ever drive and tape again. Oh, by the way, those are brilliant. So keep doing them." So that's the way they started. And yeah, I've been doing them I took a brief hiatus, but they're back in force. And what has that been, 12 years now? So
Yeah, I remember you telling me because it was a huge inspiration for me. I was so excited to talk to you about it when we were probably the second time we were in person, and you spent some great time with me to tell me about, consistency and behind the scenes, the production part. But you've done how many total episodes?
It's 422. 422. And Bob Knackle should be proud. I know my metrics on that.
That's right. That's crazy. So that's clearly almost 10 years of once a week doing Tuesday traffic tips.
Yeah, more than 10 years. Like I say, 2013, August of 2013. So August, it's been 12 years. 2023 to now, little hiatus, but back in force. So yeah.
So considering the blogging, which one of the things I like asking, us old salts like you and I is, because I launched a website when I was in Phoenix in 2002. So I was actually blogging back in 02 and 03. Wow. And all the brokers around me thought I was nuts.
100%.
Absolutely crazy nuts. In fact, here's another tidbit for you, because I know you know these guys. They're Lean Associates brothers. Is Craig Coppola and Andrew Cheney. So,
amazing producers. Great people.
Yeah. Andrew's a good friend. Andrew came in the business after me. I've only met Craig a couple of times, so I can't call him a friend. But Andrew and I did some deals together early in his career. And somewhere in that time, soon after Andrew joined the business, so it was probably 04, 05 maybe, I published a book on tenet. So I had my website, I was blogging, and I published this tiny little book. And I remember Andrew wrote me an email and he said, Craig is so pissed that you got this book out. He's been wanting to write a book. And of course, Craig's written a couple books now, but I thought that was kind of funny. Anyways, people told me I was crazy. So with your blogging and your Tuesday tips, what was the feedback from the brokerage back then? And ultimately, what's been the impact on your business since then?
Yeah, exact same reaction. What the H are you doing? You are crazy. You need to be out knocking on doors. You need to be calling prospects. What's this blogging stuff? That's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Well, in 2010, I was either the number one or number producer in our office. I can't remember because Newton and I, he and I generally number one, number two. But I'll never forget, we were at our bonus meeting where we hand out our bonus checks. And one of the guys kind of pipes up. He goes, wow, he goes, maybe that blogging stuff does make some sense. So, I would say that the visibility that social media, blogging, the Tuesday traffic tips, some of the other things that I've toyed with over the years, the visibility that's created has created a pathway to transactions. And I did the math one time, and I'm not gonna brag about, because what's a lot to me is not going to be a lot to you or a lot to someone else. But I can just tell you that the amount of dollars generated directly from social media interaction has been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It truly has, and that's not an exaggeration. It truly has. If I could share one quick story, which is sort of tantamount to what I'm talking about. So this was the summer of 2015. I got a call from a residential agent in town, and she said, I see your blogs all the time. I see you in social media. You and I have some common friends. Coincidentally, one of those common friends had recently died. She said, I saw the amazing post that you made on his website, funeral home website, when he died. He was a dear friend. I said he was a dear friend of mine as well. She said, I need your help. My neighbor is a second generation family owned, family operated manufacturing business. They own their own real estate. They sold the business 2 years ago. They retained ownership of the real estate. Things are just going awful. And they don't know if this tenant that they sold the business to is going to be able to continue to make the rent. Now, they had built this campus over the years, and it was this hodgepodge campus of buildings, which is typical when an aerospace manufacturing company expands. We'll take this one next door, this one down the street, et cetera. So they own 5 or 6 buildings on this block. And it was very, very scary because it's one of those things that you didn't want to own vacant. So she said, they're under contract to sell it. They're going to net about $27 million. They don't know what to do with the money. They've never done a tax deferred exchange. Can you help us? And I said, absolutely, right down the middle of the fairway in terms of what I do. So that was the introduction. So we sold this family 3 assets totaling $27 million. They weren't interested in leveraging. They were of an age that they just wanted the cash flow. There was no debt involved. So it was a fairly easy 1031 exchange. We did 3 deals. 4 years later, right before COVID, they called and said, hey, we've all moved to Arizona and there's no real reason. Actually, back up. I actually called them and said, hey, y'all are all living in Arizona now. There's really no reason for you to own an asset in California because you're paying California income tax on something where you could be avoiding that, paying Arizona income tax. And they said, you make a great point. Anyway, we sold one of the assets that they purchased. And with that asset, we sold that one and purchased 4 more. So just by virtue of being visible via the blogosphere, that was 9 transactions totaling, about $60 million, $70 million in consideration. So if any of your listeners think for a moment it doesn't work, rethink it. But make sure you're in it for the long haul. Make sure you're authentic. Make sure you're consistent. Make sure you're producing good content that's going to appeal to your audience, because this social media sphere can boy, you can tell a phony from a mile away. And if you're producing a bunch of AI garbage, they're gonna realize that. So
Great points. And yes, I mean, as we've talked about, the CREI Summit, which is the Commercial Real Estate Influencer Summit that Ken, blew life into 5-6 years ago, and now has turned into this amazing annual event. But the support which is what I find probably one of the best benefits of belonging to that community, is the support that all of the people that, like you and I, that are influencers in the commercial real estate world support each other, and then create a space to where the guys that are killing it, like Alan Buchanan and others, and Coy Davidson and Ken Ashley and Bob Knackle, and which is funny because I knew Bob when he wasn't doing social media. But anyways,
so did I.
It's been proven daily now that it's definitely someplace you have to be. And, me as a coach, I have, less than 30% of the people I coach are active in social media. And I think that the percentage overall across the country is probably smaller than that. Would you agree?
I would agree. I would agree. And because once again, it takes time, and it's not the direct to consumer sort of a sale, right? In other words, if I'm going to spend an hour and I'm going to try to build business spending an hour, I got several choices. I can call directly. I can call prospects directly.
Mm-hmm.
I can do what I call the indirect approach, which I could call a trusted advisor sphere that would know that prospect. Or I can do it a step further out, which would be I can create a digital platform through the various social media channels. Most believe that the quickest way to a deal is the direct way. I'm going to call that owner, I'm going to call that occupant directly. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I've found is if you can combine all three of them together, where you're doing some digital, you're doing some indirect, and you're doing some direct, that's the best balance. And everyone has to find their own balance. For me, that's, maybe 5% direct to consumer and the other 95% either through social media or through strategic partners. That's the way I choose to roll. Others that are new, that may not have a strategic network, that may not have a social media presence, you got to be knocking on those doors. You got to be making those calls. But don't ignore those other two channels, because in my mind, they're equally, if not more powerful than the direct to consumer approach.
Right. Well, and I'm not quite sure when the shift happened. I just know that, in 2000 till, I don't know, there was no way if you and I were out door knocking on industrial parks, there was no way for those owners to vet us. Google wasn't around yet. So Now the prospecting point, to your point that you just made, is you have to do a little bit of all of it, is because when you are prospecting, if they've heard of you or seen your content, guess how much better that prospecting call is going to go.
100%. Could not agree more.
So here's the best part of all of this culmination, is that you've taken your 40 plus years of experience and created a must read, published this year, The Sequence.
Yes, sir. Sequence. Hang on one second here. I just happen to have a few hundred copies handy.
Oh, did I mention that your admission price for this show is that you need to sign a copy and mail one to me?
It's already in the mail, my friend. Already in the mail. Sequence is it's a double entendre, which I really like things with double meanings. And sequence, SEQUENCE, is an acronym that stands for all the steps in a commercial real estate, or frankly, for that matter, any sort of transaction. So you got to source it, you got to evaluate it, you got to qualify it, you got to get it under contract, etc. So that's that piece. That's the tactical piece. The piece which I'm most excited about is the other meaning, which is the sequence of my career, the decisions I made, the missteps I made, the legacy play, social media marketing, strategic networking through networking groups, etc. All those are the other meaning, which frankly, I get really excited when I talk about it, because I like to believe that there were two things that I did starting in 2009 that really propel three things. that really propelled my career to where it is today. One of those we've talked about, which is coaching. The other we talked about, which was social media. And then finally, the strategic networking piece, where I realized that you can go direct to consumer, great. And I was very good at doing that and still to this day do that. Or you can figure out who the active CPAs, business attorneys, business bankers, mergers and acquisitions folks, investment bankers, you can figure out who those folks are. You can network with them, and those lead to amazing referral introductions. So that's the piece of this book where I go in depth and talk about how you do that, which I don't believe very, very, very few people take that approach to our business. And I'm really excited about the way that piece of the book turned out.
Yeah, we're all very proud of you, and I knew that once I had you on the show, and I was like, yep, there's another book I need to add to my list. I'm fortunate. I'm an avid reader. I read probably no less than 2 books a month. So I look forward to digesting every page of that. And again, congratulations.
A lot of good reading this summer. I mean, the Selling Buildings, and Amy Calandrino has a nice book out. My friend up in Toronto, Canada has a nice book out. Ken Ashley shared with me that he's got one coming out. So it's pretty cool to see. I guess that's what Amy Calandrino would not fall into this category, but I guess that's what all guys do, is we write books.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Okay, Alan, thank you so much again for being on the show. I can't wait to see you in person again. Don't know when that'll be, but when it happens, it'll be wonderful as always. And so, as I mentioned to you earlier, the other part that I do with all my fellow influencers is you get to say my tagline, which is, because the best 1031 is a successful 1031. So let me hear you say it.
Because the best 1031 is a successful 1031.
Awesome. And clearly you've done a few of those, and you shared a great story of a 1031. So I appreciate that as well. Again, thank you for being here, and thank you to everybody watching. And if you are watching this, hopefully you are going to be at the CREI Summit. It is September 10th through the 12th in Palm Desert at the JW Marriott. It's a beautiful resort. And it's every year it gets bigger and better. And Bob will be there signing his book. And just really looking forward to being with all my fellow CRE influencers. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on our next one.